Hey there, folks. Welcome back to another episode of Full Spectrum Frontiers. I'm your host, Bennett Tanton, coming to you with all the energy of a hurricane hitting the East Coast, but, without the actual destruction. Today, we're diving deep into the future of an often underappreciated but absolutely vital branch of our national security apparatus, the United States Coast Guard. That's right, the Coast Guard. Those unsung heroes in blue who keep our waters safe, save lives, and yes, sometimes even get involved in epic high seas chases that Hollywood would be jealous of. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Bennett? The Coast Guard? Aren't they just the guys who tell you not to drink and boat? Well, buckle up because today we're going to blow that stereotype out of the water. No pun intended. The Coast Guard's role is evolving, and it's not just about life jackets and rescue helicopters anymore. We're talking cyber defense, unmanned systems, intelligence operations, the whole shebang. It's like they took their Swiss Army knife of missions and added a few more blades for good measure. But before we set sail on this topic, a quick reminder. If you enjoy what you hear today, or if you found value in any of our episodes, please take a moment to like, share, and review the podcast. It helps us reach more people. And who knows, maybe you'll inspire someone else to join our conversation on the future of conflict and national security. And hey, if you've got thoughts, shoot me a message. I read them all. Even the ones from that guy who keeps insisting Bigfoot is real and should have his own branch of the military. You know who you are. All right, folks, let's get into it. Today, we'll break down the future of the Coast Guard into 5 key segments, each one exploring a different aspect of how they're gearing up for a changing world. We'll talk about evolving roles, advanced tech, the impact of climate change, international partnerships, and of course, how they're getting their people ready for all of this. So, grab your life vest. This journey is about to get real. First up, we're diving into how the Coast Guard's roles and responsibilities are evolving. And let me tell you, it's a lot more than just saying no to overfishing and making sure your lobster catch is up to regulation. They're adapting to new challenges, from maritime security to environmental protection, in ways that might surprise you. So stay with me, and let's set sail on this adventure into the future of the United States Coast Guard. All right, folks, welcome back to Full Spectrum Frontiers. I hope you've got your sea legs under you because we're about to dive into the first segment, the evolving roles and responsibilities of the United States Coast Guard. And trust me, it's a lot more than just preventing Jimmy from New Jersey from drinking too many margaritas on his fishing boat. Now, the Coast Guard has always been that jack-of-all-trades kind of service, right? They're like the Swiss Army knife of the U.S. military, small, versatile, and capable of doing a lot with a little. But in today's world, where geopolitical tensions are heating up faster than a kettle on a hot stove, their role is becoming even more dynamic. And it's not just about patrolling the coastlines anymore. Nope. They're expanding their horizons, quite literally. Let's start with maritime security. Picture this. It's a beautiful day in the South China Sea. The water's clear, the sun's shining, and, oh wait, there's a suspicious-looking vessel trying to smuggle contraband. Enter the U.S. Coast Guard. Yes, you heard me right. The Coast Guard has been increasing its presence in international waters, especially in regions where maritime law enforcement is as murky as the Mississippi after a rainstorm. They're out there working alongside the Navy, enforcing sanctions, intercepting drug traffickers, and even countering illegal fishing operations. And why illegal fishing, you ask? Well, aside from the fact that poaching someone else's tuna isn't very neighborly, it's also a multi-billion-dollar industry that often funds all sorts of nefarious activities. So, yeah, the Coast Guard isn't just catching pirates. They're going after fishy business, too. Pun very much intended. But that's not all. As the Arctic ice continues to melt, and we can all have a little panic attack about climate change later, the Coast Guard is also stepping up to the plate up north. The Arctic is like the new Wild West. But instead of cowboys and tumbleweeds, you've got icebreakers and polar bears. As new shipping routes open up and countries start eyeballing those untapped natural resources, the Coast Guard is leading the charge to ensure that our interests are protected and that this new frontier doesn't turn into the maritime equivalent of a barroom brawl. Now, some of you might be wondering, Bennett, this all sounds a bit extra for the Coast Guard. Aren't they supposed to be the guys doing search and rescue and stopping smugglers off Miami? And you'd be right. Sort of. The Coast Guard is still very much in the business of saving lives and stopping bad guys. But think about it. In a world where threats can come from anywhere, from a rogue wave to a rogue state, they have to be ready for anything. They're the Swiss Army knife, remember? But now they've got a few more tools tucked away. Maybe a little corkscrew for opening diplomatic relations, who knows? And speaking of saving lives, let's not forget their continued role in disaster response. With natural disasters becoming more frequent and more severe, thanks climate change, the Coast Guard is often the first on the scene, whether it's a hurricane hitting Florida or an earthquake shaking up Alaska. Their ability to respond quickly and effectively, both domestically and internationally, makes them a critical player in humanitarian missions. They're the ones out there in the thick of it, pulling people from floodwaters, delivering supplies, and providing medical aid when everyone else is still trying to figure out how to put their pants on. But with great power comes, you guessed it, great responsibility. And here's the thing. All these new missions mean that the Coast Guard is stretching itself thin. They're a small service by military standards. Less than 50,000 active duty personnel. Compare that to the Navy's 340,000 and you start to see the challenge. It's like asking a family-owned diner to cater a state banquet. They can do it, sure, but it's going to take some serious juggling. And yet, they do it. Day in, day out. And they do it well. They're adapting to these new challenges with the same grit and tenacity that have always defined them. From maritime law enforcement to Arctic operations to disaster response. The Coast Guard is proving that they're not just here to play it safe. They're here to play to win. They've embraced their evolving roles, and in doing so, they're shaping the future of maritime security, both at home and abroad. So, what does this mean for us, the average citizen sitting comfortably on our couches binge-watching Netflix? It means we can sleep a little easier knowing that, come high tide or hostile waters, there's a dedicated group of men and women out there watching our backs. They might not have the flashiest uniforms or the biggest budgets, but they've got heart. And sometimes that's exactly what you need when you're steering through uncharted waters. All right, that's a wrap on the first segment Up next, we're going to talk about how the Coast Guard is leveraging cutting-edge technology to stay ahead of the game. Cyber defense, unmanned systems, and maybe even a little AI magic. Spoiler alert, it's not all robots and lasers yet. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back to Full Spectrum Frontiers. If you're just joining us, we're navigating the future of the United States Coast Guard and how they're gearing up for some serious challenges ahead. In this segment, we're going to get a little geeky, so tech enthusiasts, this one's for you. We're diving into how the Coast Guard is harnessing cutting-edge technology to protect our waters. Think drones, cyber defense, and a dash of artificial intelligence. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Bennett, the Coast Guard and advanced technology. Isn't this the same group still using old-school binoculars to spot trouble on the horizon? Well, it's time to upgrade that image because the Coast Guard is stepping up its tech game like never before. In fact, they're becoming more like the Tony Stark of the sea, minus the billionaire status and the flashy suits, of course. Let's start with unmanned systems, drones, and autonomous vessels. If you've been anywhere near the tech world in the past decade, you've probably heard about drones being used for everything from filming cinematic shots to delivering pizza. But for the Coast Guard, drones are much more than a fun gadget. They're game changers. These unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, provide a bird's-eye view of vast stretches of ocean, allowing the Coast Guard to monitor suspicious activities, identify potential threats, and conduct search and rescue operations with greater speed and precision. Imagine a scenario where a small boat is stranded miles off the coast in a storm. Sending a manned aircraft is risky and expensive, but a drone? That's a whole different ball game. Drones can be deployed quickly, fly into dangerous areas without risking human lives, and provide real-time data back to command. They can cover more area than a single patrol boat and do it without breaking a sweat or an engine belt. It's like having 1,000 eyes in the sky, all working together to keep our waters safe. But that's not all. The Coast Guard is also investing in unmanned surface vehicles, USVs, essentially robotic boats. These nifty pieces of tech can patrol areas, collect data, and even conduct surveillance operations without needing a crew. And here's where it gets really cool. They can operate in swarms. That's right, swarms. Picture a group of these robotic boats patrolling a high-risk area, communicating with each other and coordinating their movements, like a pack of wolves. Except, they're a lot more polite and don't eat sheep. And then there's the cyber front. Now, I know cyber defense sounds about as exciting as a root canal, but stick with me here. The Coast Guard is increasingly finding itself on the front lines of cyber warfare. Think about it. Every ship, every port, every system is now connected. And where there are connections, there are vulnerabilities. It's like that one friend who keeps getting their email hacked because they can't resist clicking on those "You've won $1 million" links. The Coast Guard can't afford to have that kind of weakness. So they're ramping up their cyber capabilities. They've established specialized cyber units tasked with protecting critical maritime infrastructure from cyber threats. These units are like the Coast Guard's own version of the Avengers. But instead of fighting aliens, they're fighting malware and phishing attacks. And let's not underestimate this, because a successful cyber attack could cripple port operations, disrupt supply chains, or even endanger lives. It's a serious business, and the Coast Guard is stepping up to the plate. But cyber defense isn't just about playing defense. The Coast Guard is also going on the offense. They're actively working to identify and neutralize potential threats before they can cause harm. It's like a game of chess, but the stakes are a lot higher than losing your favorite bishop. And let me tell you, the bad guys, they're not playing checkers anymore. They're getting smarter, faster, and more sophisticated. But so is the Coast Guard. And of course, we can't talk about tech without mentioning artificial intelligence, AI. Now, before you start picturing a fleet of Coast Guard Terminators patrolling the high seas, let me bring you back down to earth. AI in the Coast Guard is less about killer robots and more about data. Lots and lots of data. The Coast Guard collects an ocean of data every day, from ship movements to weather patterns to intelligence reports. And sifting through all the data to find the needle in the haystack, that's where AI comes in. AI algorithms can analyze massive amounts of information quickly and accurately, identifying patterns and potential threats that a human might miss. For example, if a ship is behaving erratically or deviating from its known route, AI can flag it for further investigation. It's like having a super smart assistant who never sleeps and is always on the lookout for trouble. And in a world where every second counts, that kind of speed and efficiency can make all the difference. But let's not sugarcoat things. With all this advanced tech comes new challenges. Cyber defense requires constant vigilance. One slip up, and you could have a disaster on your hands. Unmanned systems, while revolutionary, aren't foolproof. They require maintenance, they're expensive, and in some cases, they're still more sci-fi than reality. And AI? Well, it's only as good as the data you feed it. Garbage in, garbage out, as they say. But here's the silver lining. The Coast Guard isn't shying away from these challenges. They're embracing them, leaning into the future with a can-do spirit that's as American as apple pie. They're taking risks, innovating, and constantly looking for ways to improve. Because they know that to protect our future, they need to stay one step ahead of the game. And they're doing just that. So, the next time you see a Coast Guard cutter out on the water, don't just think of it as a boat with a bunch of guys and gals in blue. Think of it as a floating hub of cutting-edge technology, ready to take on whatever challenges come their way, whether it's a storm on the horizon or a hacker behind a keyboard. All right, folks, that wraps up our second segment. Coming up next, we'll be talking about the impact of climate change on Coast Guard operations. Spoiler alert, it's not just about melting icebergs and stranded polar bears. So stick around, there's a lot more to come. Would you like me to proceed with writing the next section on the impact of climate change on Coast Guard operations? All right, welcome back, intrepid listeners. We're cruising right along here on Full Spectrum Frontiers as we explore the future of the United States Coast Guard. So far, we've talked about their evolving roles and how they're leveraging technology to stay ahead of the game. Now, it's time to dive into something a little more elemental: climate change. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Bennett, climate change? Really? Isn't that more in the wheelhouse of Noé or some environmental scientist? Well, yes and no. Climate change is everybody's business, but when it comes to its impact on national security, and particularly the Coast Guard, it's a whole different ballgame. We're not just talking about a few extra degrees on the thermometer here. We're talking about rising sea levels, melting ice caps, the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, AMOC collapse, and storms that are more unpredictable than a toddler on a sugar high. And believe me, the Coast Guard is feeling the heat, literally and figuratively. Let's start with the Arctic region. Now, the Arctic is like the final frontier of climate change. It's the place where the effects are most visible, and the Coast Guard has a front row seat to all the action. As the ice melts, new shipping routes are opening up that were previously inaccessible. That's great news if you're looking to shave a few days off your shipping times. But here's the catch. With these new routes come new responsibilities. The Coast Guard is tasked with ensuring that these waters are safe for navigation, free from hazards, and protected from potential environmental disasters. It's like being the hall monitor in a school where all the hallways are constantly shifting and nobody's quite sure where the fire exits are. And it's not just about keeping the lanes clear. The Arctic is also rich in natural resources, oil, gas, minerals. And as countries start eyeing those resources like a kid eyes the last slice of pizza, the potential for conflict increases. The Coast Guard's presence in the Arctic is a critical deterrent to any nation that might be tempted to test the waters, so to speak. They're up there in icebreakers, conducting patrols, gathering intelligence, and generally making sure that things don't go from chilly to downright icy in terms of international relations. But wait, there's more. Climate change isn't just affecting the far north. It's hitting closer to home, too. Rising sea levels are threatening coastal communities all across the United States. From Miami to New Orleans to Norfolk, Virginia, where, by the way, we have some pretty important naval installations, higher tides and stronger storms are becoming the new norm. And guess who's on the front lines of responding to all this? You guessed it, the Coast Guard. Think about it. More frequent and severe hurricanes, coastal flooding, and erosion are putting lives and property at risk. The Coast Guard is often the first on the scene, rescuing people from flooded homes, delivering essential supplies, and coordinating evacuation efforts. It's like being a superhero without the cape or the ability to fly. They're the ones going door to door in a hurricane, making sure everyone gets out safely, all while trying to keep themselves safe in the process. And trust me, that's no easy feat when the weather decides to throw a tantrum. And let's talk about wildfires for a moment. Now, you might be scratching your head and thinking, what do wildfires have to do with the Coast Guard? Well, quite a bit, actually. The Coast Guard plays a crucial role in supporting firefighting efforts, particularly in coastal areas where fires can threaten not just land-based infrastructure, but also vital maritime assets and coastal ecosystems. They're out there coordinating aerial support, providing logistics, and even conducting water rescues for folks trapped by the flames. It's all hands on deck when Mother Nature decides to show us who's boss. But here's the kicker. Climate change isn't just increasing the frequency and intensity of natural disasters. It's also expanding the Coast Guard's operational mandate. They're now tasked with more environmental protection missions than ever before. That means more oil spill responses, more hazardous material cleanups, and more enforcement of environmental laws to prevent damage to our oceans and coastal ecosystems. It's a big job, and it's getting bigger. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. This all sounds pretty daunting, and it is. The Coast Guard is stretched thin, and the challenges are piling up like paperwork on a Monday morning. But here's the thing. They're not backing down. They're stepping up. They're adapting, innovating, and finding new ways to meet these challenges head on. They're investing in new technologies, building stronger partnerships with other agencies and countries, and training their people to be more resilient and adaptable. It's not just about having more boats or better gear, although that certainly helps. It's about mindset. The Coast Guard understands that the world is changing, and they're committed to changing with it. They're ready to face these challenges, not just as a military service, but as a humanitarian force, a first responder, and an environmental steward. They're proving every day that they're up to the task, no matter what Mother Nature throws at them. So what does all this mean for us? It means we have a Coast Guard that's more agile, more versatile, and more committed than ever to protecting our shores and our way of life. It means that even in the face of unprecedented challenges, there's a group of dedicated men and women who are ready to do whatever it takes to keep us safe. And that, my friends, is something to be optimistic about. The Coast Guard is proving that no matter how rough the seas get, they're ready to steer the ship through any storm. All right, that wraps up our third segment. Next, we're going to explore how the Coast Guard is building stronger international partnerships to tackle global maritime challenges. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss this. So stick around. Would you like me to proceed with writing the next section on the importance of strengthening international partnerships for the Coast Guard's future? We've talked about their evolving roles, their tech game, and the impacts of climate change. Now, let's zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture. Because the Coast Guard isn't just America's Coast Guard. It's becoming the world's Coast Guard. And no, that doesn't mean they're planning to put buoys around the globe and claim it all as U.S. territorial waters. Although, wouldn't that be a headline? Today, we're diving into international partnerships. That's right, folks. These days, it's all about working together. Remember when your parents used to tell you that sharing is caring? Well, it turns out that's true even when it comes to global maritime security. Who knew? Now, why is the Coast Guard so focused on building these partnerships? Well, for starters, the ocean is a pretty big place. I mean, really big. Like 3/4 of the planet big. And no single country, not even one with as much maritime muscle as the United States, can keep an eye on everything all the time. It's just not possible. And that's where our friends come in. The Coast Guard has been forging stronger ties with allied nations around the world to enhance maritime security. We're talking joint exercises, shared intelligence, and cooperative missions to combat everything from piracy to drug trafficking to human smuggling. Think of it like an international neighborhood watch. But instead of looking out for suspicious characters on the corner, they're keeping an eye out for illegal fishing trawlers or suspicious cargo ships. And let's be real, this isn't just about making friends. It's about being smart. Because the challenges we face on the water aren't just American problems. They're global problems. Illegal fishing, for example, is not just about some rogue fishermen trying to make a quick buck. It's about organized crime, environmental degradation, and even geopolitical tensions. It's like that game of Risk you played as a kid, but with real-world consequences. And the Coast Guard? They're making sure everyone's playing by the rules. Take the South China Sea, for example. It's a hotbed of activity, with multiple nations staking their claims and sometimes getting a little too close for comfort. The Coast Guard has been out there, working with allies like Japan, the Philippines, and Australia, to ensure that this doesn't turn into a maritime free-for-all. They're conducting joint patrols, sharing intelligence, and building trust among regional partners. Because at the end of the day, it's about ensuring freedom of navigation, respecting international law, and maintaining peace and stability. It's like being the referee in the world's biggest water polo game, without the whistle, but with a lot more diplomacy. And let's not forget about counter-piracy operations off the coast of Africa. Pirates might sound like something out of a Disney movie, but they're very real, and they're very dangerous. But here's the twist. Pirates aren't just out there for the gold and doubloons anymore. They're part of organized criminal networks that fund terrorism, human trafficking, and all sorts of bad stuff. The Coast Guard has been teaming up with European and African partners to patrol these waters, intercepting pirates before they can strike, and working to dismantle their networks. It's a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, and the Coast Guard is proving to be a very effective cat. But it's not all about high-stakes operations. Sometimes it's about building relationships and sharing knowledge. The Coast Guard regularly engages in training exercises with partners from around the world. They're out there teaching other nations how to conduct search and rescue missions, enforce maritime law, and respond to environmental disasters. It's about capacity building, helping our allies become more self-sufficient and better prepared to handle their own maritime challenges. It's like teaching your neighbor how to mow their lawn properly so they don't accidentally set their yard and yours on fire. And here's where it gets interesting. These partnerships aren't just with countries you'd expect. The Coast Guard is reaching out to some unlikely allies, nations that, on the surface, might seem like strange bedfellows. But that's the beauty of it. In the realm of maritime security, sometimes the best partnerships are the unexpected ones. It's about finding common ground, even if that ground happens to be a few thousand miles of open ocean. Now, I know this all sounds like a global kumbaya moment, but let's not get too carried away. There are still plenty of challenges to these partnerships. Different countries have different priorities, different capabilities, and sometimes different ideas about what's legal and what's not. There's also the issue of trust. It's not always easy to share intelligence or coordinate operations, especially when national interests are at stake. It's like trying to play a team sport where everyone has a different playbook. But here's the good news. Despite these challenges, the Coast Guard is making it work. They're proving that when it comes to maritime security, cooperation is not just possible, it's essential. They're showing that by working together, we can tackle the biggest challenges, whether it's piracy, drug trafficking, illegal fishing, or even the threat of terrorism. And there's a lesson in that for all of us, isn't there? That in a world that often feels divided, there's still room for collaboration, for partnership, and for finding common ground. That no matter how big the ocean, we're all in this together. So, the next time you hear about a joint Coast Guard exercise in the Pacific or a cooperative mission in the Atlantic, remember this. It's not just about showing off naval prowess or flexing military muscles. It's about building a safer, more secure world, one partnership at a time. All right, folks, that's it for our fourth segment. Up next, We're going to dive into how the Coast Guard is preparing its workforce for the future, because you can't build a stronger Coast Guard without strong people. Stay tuned. Now, it's time to shift our focus a bit and talk about the most important asset the Coast Guard has, its people. That's right, folks. Because you can have all the fancy drones, icebreakers, and cyber units you want. But at the end of the day, it's the men and women in uniform who make it all happen. They're the ones braving the storms, boarding the ships, crunching the data, and doing whatever it takes to keep our waters safe. And as the Coast Guard looks to the future, one of its biggest challenges and opportunities will be preparing its workforce to meet those challenges head on. Let's start with recruitment. Now, recruiting for the Coast Guard is a bit like fishing. Sometimes you cast a wide net, and sometimes you're after a very specific catch. The Coast Guard needs a diverse range of skills and talents, from engineers to cyber experts to rescue swimmers. And with all these new roles and responsibilities we've been talking about, that list is only getting longer. But here's the catch. Pun absolutely intended. Today's recruits are a different breed. They're tech savvy, they're ambitious, and they're looking for more than just a paycheck. They want a sense of purpose, a chance to make a difference, and a place where they can grow both personally and professionally. So, the Coast Guard is changing the way it recruits, focusing not just on the skills they need today, but the ones they'll need tomorrow. They're going after folks who are digital natives, who grew up with a smartphone in one hand and a video game controller in the other. They're looking for people who are comfortable with technology, who can think on their feet, and who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty. Because let's face it, the future of the Coast Guard isn't just about steering ships. It's about navigating the digital seas as well. But recruitment is only the first step. Once they've got these new recruits on board, pun again, absolutely intended, it's all about training. And here's where things get really interesting. The Coast Guard is investing in new training programs designed to prepare its personnel for a wider range of missions than ever before. This isn't your grandfather's Coast Guard. They're training people to handle everything from cyber threats to Arctic operations to humanitarian missions in the wake of natural disasters. For example, they've developed specialized training programs for their cyber units, teaching recruits how to defend against digital threats and respond to cyber incidents. And this isn't just about learning how to use a computer. We're talking full-scale simulations, live-fire cyber exercises, and even gaming-style scenarios designed to test their skills under pressure. It's like Call of Duty, but with a lot more spreadsheets and a lot less shooting. And then there's the diversity of experience they're fostering. The Coast Guard is making sure that its people aren't just specialists in one area, but have a broad base of skills that can be applied across different missions. They're cross-training personnel to be versatile and adaptable, capable of switching roles as the situation demands. It's like being in an action movie, where you have to go from being the tech geek hacking the mainframe to the hero piloting the helicopter to save the day, all before lunch. And let's not forget about leadership training. The Coast Guard understands that to face the challenges of the future, they need strong leaders who can make quick decisions under pressure, who can think strategically, and who can inspire others to follow. They're investing heavily in developing these leaders from within, providing mentorship, advanced training programs, and opportunities for growth. They're cultivating a new generation of leaders who are ready to steer the ship, both literally and metaphorically, into uncharted waters. But here's the thing, folks, it's not just about training and skills, it's also about culture. The Coast Guard knows that to attract and retain the best people, they need to foster an organizational culture that values innovation, encourages collaboration, and supports personal and professional growth. They're working to create an environment where every member feels valued, where their contributions are recognized, and where they're encouraged to bring new ideas to the table. And this is critical because, let's be honest, the Coast Guard isn't exactly known for its big budgets or flashy perks. They're the underdogs of the military world, the ones who get the job done with less fanfare and fewer resources. But they've turned that into a strength. They've built a culture that's all about resilience, resourcefulness, and teamwork. It's about knowing that when the chips are down, you can count on the person next to you to have your back, and that's something you can't put a price on. But let's be real here. It's not all smooth sailing. The Coast Guard faces some serious challenges when it comes to its workforce. Retention is tough, especially when private sector opportunities can often offer more competitive salaries and benefits. And then there's the issue of burnout. The Coast Guard's mission tempo is high, and the demands on its personnel are intense. Keeping people motivated and engaged in such a high-stress environment isn't easy. But here's the silver lining. The Coast Guard is tackling these challenges head-on. They're implementing new programs to support mental health and well-being, providing more opportunities for career advancement, and working to create a more inclusive and supportive work environment. They know that to protect the future, they need to invest in their people. And that's exactly what they're doing. So what's the takeaway here? It's simple. The future of the Coast Guard isn't just about ships, drones, or icebreakers. It's about people, dedicated, skilled, and passionate individuals who are ready to meet the challenge of tomorrow with courage and commitment. And as long as they have that, the Coast Guard is going to be just fine, no matter what the future holds. All right, that wraps up our 5th segment. We've covered a lot today, from evolving roles to cutting-edge tech to the incredible people who make it all possible. But don't go away just yet. Stick around for the outro, where we'll wrap everything up and look ahead to what's next for Full Spectrum Frontiers. Stay tuned. All right, folks, we're nearing the end of another episode of Full Spectrum Frontiers. It's been a deep dive into the future of the United States Coast Guard, and I hope you've enjoyed the journey as much as I have. We've covered a lot of ground, or should I say, a lot of water, today, exploring how this remarkable branch of our armed forces is evolving to meet the challenges of a rapidly changing world. From expanding their roles in maritime security and environmental protection to embracing cutting-edge technology like drones, cyber defense, and artificial intelligence, the Coast Guard is proving that they're not just keeping up with the times, they're leading the charge. We've talked about the impact of climate change and how the Coast Guard is stepping up to protect not only our coastlines, but also our way of life from the unpredictable forces of nature. And let's not forget about their international partnerships, building bridges across oceans to tackle global threats and enhance security on a worldwide scale. But, as we've discussed, None of this would be possible without the incredible men and women who make up the Coast Guard. They're the heart and soul of this operation, and as we look to the future, it's clear that their commitment, courage, and adaptability will be the driving force behind the Coast Guard's continued success. They're training harder, thinking smarter, and leading with a spirit of innovation that's truly inspiring. So, what's the big takeaway here? Well, it's simple. The Coast Guard may be a relatively small branch of our military, but their impact is anything but small. They're tackling some of the biggest challenges of our time with a unique blend of resilience, versatility, and a can-do attitude that's quintessentially American. They're proving that you don't need to be the biggest to be the best. You just need to be ready to step up, adapt, and keep moving forward. And I think there's a lesson in that for all of us, don't you? Whether it's in our personal lives, our careers, or our communities, there's something to be said for being flexible, staying committed, and always being ready to face whatever comes our way. So let's take a page out of the Coast Guard's book and keep pushing forward, no matter what. Before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to thank all of you for tuning in today. Your support means the world to me, and I hope you found this episode both informative and inspiring. If you liked what you heard, or if you've got thoughts, feedback, or even your own stories to share, please take a moment to like, share, and review the podcast. Your reviews help us reach more listeners and keep this conversation going. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. We've got a lot more great content coming your way, exploring the full spectrum of conflict and national security and the impact it has on all of us. And hey, if you've got a topic you'd like us to cover, drop me a line. I'm always looking for new ideas, and who knows, your suggestion might just be the focus of our next deep dive. So, until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and keep navigating those full spectrum frontiers. This is Bennett Tanton, signing off. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode.
It's just you, me, and the odds. We stuck together, we two peas in a pod. You dealt a bad hand, I'm there seizing the cards. We'll never be separated till we see in the gods. We've been low together, high forever. Long as we go together, we'll die whenever. Be your light, couldn't let the darkness try you ever. Truth in my word, you I lie to never. And when the world gets a little too hard, wipe your eyes, put away your sorrow. When it's war, I'll be leading the charge, and I'll be still fighting for you tomorrow. Yeah, even with a blindfold or in different time zones, could find my way to you with my eyes closed. There's nothing between us. Go to Mars and Venus, stand in front of every one of them rocks, they slimming and be a shield. Yeah. In the fiercest battle, I'll defend you. From all these arrows in the sword, I will keep you from danger. Let me be your shield. Yeah, let's go. Let me be your shield, let me be your shield. Let me be your shield, let me be your shield. Let me be your shield, let me be your shield. Let me be your shield, let me be your shield. You may be facing tribulation, but don't let it get you down. What I'm saying may take patience, but you're gonna make it out. I scorched my own 2 feet to pull you to safety. When the fires are burning